Hey, how you doing? He's back. The grumpiest man in the world. I've had literally some request for more Walter Armstrong, and, because I love him so much, how could I possibly say no? So we're going to go back to Walter Armstrong now, and this time we're going to hear what Walter Armstrong thinks about the state of wrestling in Scotland. Regular viewers, my fight team, will appreciate the irony. So, I've cunningly not marked the page, so give me one moment. Just talk among yourselves. Japanese wrestling, we've covered Japanese. Irish, we'll come to Irish at some stage. Here we go. Chapter 6, Scottish wrestling. Scotland can scarcely be called a wrestling country, as the writer who was born on the Scottish border in the 30s knows well enough. You'll note that he doesn't tell us which side of the Scottish border he was born on. But those of you that suggested that he was perhaps a borderman and descended from the Reivers were probably right. The English lads, especially those from Carlisle, could fell the Scotsmen in rings such as Jedburgh, Howick, Wooler, Langham, Longtown and Carlisle. Only once did a man free the land of cakes win the chief prize at Carlisle. That's not me doing an accent just for the laugh. That's exactly how he's written it. Admittedly, I did ham it up a little. At that period, 1812, the premier wrestling ring in England, and that man was James Scott of Canonby, a middleweight wrestler. In the finals, he vanquished the famous William Richardson of Coldbeck in Cumberland, Belted Will, so called, as he had won 140 belts in the wrestling arena. That's quite a lot of belts. The Cumberland and Westmoreland method was then the recognised style of wrestling throughout the whole of Scotland, but some 30 or more years ago, the famous all-round athlete Donald Dinnie, probably the best man that Scotland ever produced, having beaten the champions of America, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, India, and other parts of the globe, including Europe, in every possible exercise, landed once again in bonny Scotland with his massive chest studded with medals of all kinds, especially golden ones, as evidence of the mighty Highlanders' prowess at tossing the caber, throwing the hammer, putting the stone, running, high leaping, and wrestling. I'm sensing a bit of a man crush there. Do you think? Donald knew perfectly well that he could not throw such men as William Jameson of Penrith and Dick Wright of Longtown, the then recognised champions of England, in the Cumberland and Westmoreland style. The Scottish champion, however, was always a man of resource, and he introduced a new system of wrestling into the northern part of Scotland and called it the Scottish style. It was thought by a good many of us, imbued with wrestling proclivities, that the champion would have better served his native land had he not introduced to the land of the brown heath and shaggy wood that pernicious system, dignified by the appellation of the Greco-Roman or classic style. Donald imported that method of struggling on all fours. The present recognised Scotch style of wrestling is to take hold, firstly in the Cumberland and Westmoreland style, and when the two men are on the ground, to battle for the mastery, two shoulders down, to constitute a fall, either in Lancashire fashion or under Greco-Roman rules. See, he still manages to get the little dig in about Cumberland and Westmoreland being better, even though we're talking about somewhere that isn't Cumberland and Westmoreland. At an early period, it's beyond doubt that wrestling was practised by the Scottish nobility under first down-to-lose conditions. The Ettrick Shepherd, in his description of the contest between Carmichael and Norman Hunter of Polmood, makes the two champions compete in the Cumberland and Westmoreland style. Carmichael was difficult to please in the hold, but when they closed, Hunter whipped his opponent up into his arms and threw him like a child. I'm not sure throwing children is a good idea. It's probably frowned upon. At the yearly festival instituted for the celebration of the St. Ronan's Border Games, Jamie Hogg, the Ettrick Shepherd, was captain and assumed the principal management. Sir Walter himself was well pleased to be enrolled among them, and during several years was a regular attendant both on the meadow where leaping, racing, stone-heaving, hammer-throwing and wrestling went on, opposite to the noble old castle of Traquair, and... Traquair? Is that right? Tracare? Don't know. If I've got any Scottish viewers, please let me know how I should be pronouncing that. And at the subsequent banquet, where Hogg, arrayed in the full costume of doublet of Lincoln green, presided as master of ceremonies, and commonly supported by Sir Walter Scott, Professor Wilson, Sir Adam Ferguson, and Peter Robertson, a gayer spectacle than that of the St. Ronan's Games could not well be imagined. The shepherd, even on the verge of threescore, would try his hand at the wrestling. Professor Wilson threw the hammer with success, and also threw the shepherd in a wrestling bout. But as Hogg wrestled in top boots, he could scarcely be reckoned a first-class performer. Wrestled in top boots? Is that related to what Parkins talked about when he was talking about boots? Well, maybe. The Earl of Traquair was a patron of the club, and among the members occur the Duke of Buccleuch, Lord Napier, Robert Gladstone of Liverpool, William Blackwood, James Ballantyne, and Adam Wilson, captain of the 6 Feet Club, and at a later date, Glassford Bell, Sheriff of Lanarkshire. It's said that Christopher North was anxious to get enrolled in the 6 Feet Club, but could not manage it. He was just half an inch too short. The first competition, held at Innerleithen, was won in 1827 by George Scougal, a native of the village. On one side of the medal was the following inscription: presented by the 6 Feet Club to the St. Ronan's Border Club to be awarded to the best wrestler at their first gymnastic competition at Innerleithen, 26th of September, 1827. And on the reverse side, the following quotation from Waller: Great Julius on the mountain bred, a flock perchance or herd had led. He who subdued the world had been, but the best wrestler on the green. In his day, Scougal was looked upon as the champion wrestler on the Scottish side of the borders. Remnants of these sports may be witnessed to this day at Howick, Langholm, Newcastleton, Jedburgh and Kelso. But they are only shadows of the long ago. Even the Bridge of Allan gathering has fallen off considerably as an attraction in the face of the acrobatic business at the music halls and other temples of amusement in the big cities and towns in Scotland. Speaking of the Bridge of Allan and the sports held there some 30 years ago, Jameson, the then champion wrestler and pole leaper, arrived at that fascinating resort on the night previous to the wrestling meeting, and to pass away the time, the great wrestler took off his coat in the billiard room of the hotel where he was staying and indulged in a game. Afterwards, he took a turn as marker. During the evening, a big giant came down from the hills who told the landlord that he would fling everybody at wrestling and fecht them afterwards. Huts tuts, replied the landlord, who knew his man. Tha canna whistle a paddock. Brackets. Frog. Why, Billy the Marker can fling tha sitting. A £10 note he doesna, said the hillman. The money was duly staked, and both went into the billiard room to apprise Billy the Marker of what had already taken place. All right, said Jameson. I's ready. The hillman, however, was rather surprised at the bulk of the presumed marker, as he expected to see a bit of a feckless chap about 10 stone or thereabouts. A ring was soon formed in the back settlements of the house, and both stripped, but Jameson, instead of getting hand in his usual style, did not grip for a long time. And of course his host and backer could not understand Jameson's hesitation, who kept sidling up to the edge of the ring. At last he got near the hotel keeper, and in a stage whisper he said, "Governor, what's o'er to heave?" "Half, thou silly fool, gang on," replied the landlord, and in the twinkling of a cheese-press the novice was laid out, flat as a flounder. But when the bellman called out on the following day, William Jameson of Penrith, champion of England, come into the ring, the victim frae the hills knew how he'd been done. I think there's a few things there. Firstly, apologies for the Scottish accent. It had to be done. That's exactly how it's written. And yes, I've hammed it up, but, live with it. He knows an awful lot about this area. Obviously, he is from the Scottish borders. But he's still got this bit of a thing for everyone south of the border is better than the people from north of the border. And it does make me wonder if that's why he changed his nationality later in his life. Yeah. Let me know what you think. I'm a huge fan of Scottish backhold wrestling. as it's done nowadays. I don't really know how this fits with the history of that. I know that backhold isn't necessarily the traditional Scottish wrestling that dates back a long time, but it is still carried out at Highland Games and fairs across Scotland. And as you know, if you go back through my videos, I've been partial to the odd bout of backhold myself, despite it being Scottish backhold that I was doing when I crippled myself. Anyway, we'll talk more about Armstrong in the future, and yeah, thanks for getting to the end of the video. Before I disappear, I just want to say how much I love the bokeh from that little lantern behind me. It's yeah, it's quite something. Still not got the office how I want, but I think we're getting there slowly but surely. So, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon, and fight team!